Welcome back to another video on NovelWriter. I've already done 2, possibly 3 videos on NovelWriter already, and this one I'm going to show you the last updates that I've made to the code. In the previous ones I showed you what I did from generating all of the text via LLM calls and then updating the app such that I generate a lot more locally on my machine, things such as character names and faction names and so on. They just weren't very good whenever you send those to an LLM. Here in the latest update of what I'm showing you is, as you can see on the screen, Agentic Workflows. This is where I've added some sort of agent capabilities to the app, although let me preface this by saying that there isn't actually an LLM-brain in the app anywhere. There's no thinking done by the LLM, it's just purely processing, and all of the decision making is done inside the app, and it's basically programmatic. That is a little bit of a departure from what you normally think of, or what you would think of now whenever people talk about agents or agentic. And what I'm doing is, I guess, like an older definition, shall we say. I think that agents are interesting. I think there's a lot to do. There's a lot that agents can do, and I mean that I suppose in the new sense of LLM agents. However, there's going to be a lot of problems, especially within business, which will need automation and perhaps an agentic pattern, but not necessarily an LLM powered agent. It might not be entirely clear right now, and it may not even be clear precisely by the end of the video, but I think if you have that idea in your mind and think on it for a little while, that it'll become clearer. So I'm going to remind you a little bit about what NovelWriter is. This is essentially the 3rd video in the series. If you haven't seen the previous ones, this may not make sense to you, and so it'd be worth going back to see them. However, I'll give you some overview here so you'll at least get a flavour of what NovelWriter is. So it's an app, and it was written in Python, it's open source, it's available in GitHub, and you can call the main LLM models from the big 3 providers. I have the ability to use the API, to basically use the libraries, the API libraries, such that you can call LLMs that way. I've also added in support for the CLI tools, such as Codex, Claude Code, and Gemini CLI. That is a very new feature that I just added within the last few days. I haven't actually touched this app probably in a couple of months. Whenever I put in the agent capabilities, it was probably a couple of months ago from the time of recording. So you can generate text for multiple genres. You can essentially write novels, hence NovelWriter, but you can also write short stories now as well, or anything kind of in between. Whenever you're in the novel mode of generating text for a novel, you're looking at 50,000 words for GPT-4 and Gemini sort of from 1.5 to 2.5. You could quite easily generate 100,000 words. Now this is all very top-down, rigid in the way that it's structured, meaning that the outputs are almost going to be the same, give or take, every time in terms of the length. The GPT-4 model is a little bit lazier, shall we say, or rather it's just the way, I guess it's the way it's designed, and with the amount of resources that it has, it will just generate shorter texts, whereas Gemini will generate longer texts. I haven't really tested this with Gemini 3 nor with GPT-5 much. I've done some very, very shallow testing with GPT-5. It is available inside the app. You can also access Claude's 4.5. I think it's Sonnet is the one that I've got. In an older version, there was Claude, I think 3.5 and 3.7. However, I've removed those. Those are slightly deprecated models now. They're a bit older, and it's really better just to go with the newer models. I think in terms of pricing, there isn't really much difference in pricing either. I don't really want to have the most expensive models in the app either. So in the first few versions of what you've seen in previous videos, it was a very manual process. Everything is programmatic, and you follow the process in order to generate the novel. So you click on the buttons one by one in order to generate each chunk of the story. So this is obviously ripe for automation. If you are pressing the buttons manually as a human, you could easily turn that into an automated process. And that's essentially what I've done in what was the latest update from a couple of months ago for the app. You can't see it in this image, but I'll show you in a little bit, and it'll all become clear. I will quickly tab to the app itself, and I've got in the parameters here for science fiction and space opera. It's going to be a short story. You'll see on the right I've got this workflow, and it just tells you that no files have been created yet, nothing has started, but you can actually set this going to generate the entire story in one go from a single click. I'll show you the workflow tab. So it's enabled, and this would be the entire workflow. However, I think within the time of this video, I'm not going to be able to generate the entire thing. I am mindful that if I don't start now, that there may not be anything generated by the end of the video. So I'm going to click Generate Lore, and some of this is done locally, so character generation is done locally, factions are generated locally, and a few other things. But there are some parts towards the end, such as character descriptions for the main characters, which do require LLM calls. And here I'm using the Gemini CLI as the backend. I'm paying for a Gemini subscription, basically through a Google subscription, which is why I'm doing this. And so I get some amount of API calls included within this, which is why I'm doing it. So it's basically no extra added cost above what I'm already paying, whereas API calls are always per request, and you have to just top up the account. So back to the brief presentation. So I was telling you about how it's manual, how you have to press each button, whereas now you can essentially either do major sections as one button, so you have 4 buttons which covers each major section. So this here is Generate Lore, so there'll be one button for Generate Lore, which basically clicks all of these buttons turn by turn. Of course, it calls the functions internally rather than pressing buttons, but that's basically what it does. Just to remind you a little bit about how it works, if you've already heard this before in the previous videos, you may be sick of hearing this, but I shall do a quick reminder just in case it's been a little while. Collecting the parameters is basically like collecting the genre and the subgenre, such as like science fiction and space opera, and a few other things that you may want to put in order to seed the story. You generate the background lore, which is like the button that I just pressed. There is then specific lore, which is things like a list of technology, such as like, far future, faster than light. Maybe there's like wormhole technology or whatever. That's the sort of things that would come in. Again, this is all programmatic. It's also configurable. You could go in and you could change it. Generate factions, generate planets, generate characters. All done locally. With the exception of character descriptions where there's an LLM call. Next is to generate structure, and that's to create the story arcs and then the acts within the arcs. So the arc is obviously the overall storyline. There's character arcs, which are part of this overall storyline. So there'll be an arc per character, and for each faction, the major factions, you could have like 20 different factions if you want to set that as a parameter. If there's only 3 or 4, then you probably have a story arc per faction. That's what can be included. An act is like what you'd expect within a book, maybe like 3 acts or 5 acts. In what I've been doing, I had 6 acts. It's just kind of what I thought made sense. And that's really for novels. If you're doing like a short story, you might only have 3 acts or 1 or whatever. This is configurable, so there are options. So that's basically trying to divide the story arcs into logical chunks. And so you might have a story arc with 6 logical chunks or 3 logical chunks. Within the acts, there's going to be chapters, and I think that's pretty obvious. So Act 1 might have 5 chapters or 10 chapters. And so you generate a chapter outline once you've got the acts. And then you generate a scene outline for each chapter once you've done the previous step. And then you generate the prose. So you've probably heard that all before, but it's worth recapping. Now I show you here, this was basically the last slide of this presentation, which was to show you the new workflow tab, which allows you to completely generate the story if you want using the green button here. You'd have to enable it, and then you'd basically just press it once and it would generate everything. If you're generating a novel, that will take a long time. if you're generating each section, you can you won't have to wait so long, and you can press the buttons one by one. And if you want, you can close the app and always come back to it another day or another time or whatever. So that is an option if you're low on time or you're worried or whatever. There is also a sort of feedback mechanism where there's a part of the code, an agent if you want to call it that, will check the quality of the text that comes back from the LLM and then decide if the quality is good enough or whether it has to be redone. And the app can do that. So that sounds like the sort of thing that an LLM could do. However, in this simple version I have, the LLM is not deciding that, but I'm using a machine learning library within the app to decide upon a quality, basically. And this threshold you can set to be whatever you want. And that's basically whether it will generate again or not. So as a reminder, the agents here are agents in a sense of that they have some function and they're working towards some goal, which is what an agent basically is accepted to be. However, there's no LLM-brain, as I've said a couple of times now. And I think that is reasonable. It's not the only way that you can do it. And I've actually written another app that I'm going to cover in another video very soon, which actually does use the LLM to be a brain. And so it's LLM powered and it's an LLM agent. And that's going to be my next app, which is Story Daemon, which is essentially written, not perfect, but it's done to a good level. And that'll be out on a video very, very soon. And that was created for NanoGenmo in November 2025, whereas this one was for NanoGenmo November 2024, as you may have seen already online. So not much more to say in that. I will click back to the app since you probably saw the little green button pop up saying that it was done. And so this here is the live app, and you can see that in the Workflows tab, it shows you that load generation is now completed. And there's 6 files, and if I click on this, it will show you that there is a background for the antagonist, deuteragonist, I don't know if I can even say that, protagonist, which is your hero, and then there's a characters.json, a factions.json, and then some generated lore, which is a markdown file. If I click this button, I can't remember, I haven't done it for a while, and you can probably see this popping up now within my file system. You can see that there's the various files, JSONs, and the markdowns, and generated lore, which I can probably show you something very quick. It maybe looks a little bit ugly on the eyes. However, it is all there, and this has been generated by Gemini. I think it's 2.5 Pro. Each of the names that are highlighted here in bold should be real character names from the JSON files, not like ones that have been sort of semi-hallucinated by the LLM. I say should. There's always a chance that it doesn't work out well. This is the background for the main character, as you can see here, and I'm hoping that this Admiral Sky will appear in the background lore. Ah, yes, they are. Here they are. I was slightly worried there that I generated this in my recording of the generation, that somehow it would mess up, because that would look a bit silly for me. So it's there, and I think the other characters who have been generated locally should also appear. Vale and Dante. I did see Dante, and I'm pretty sure I saw Vale. Yep, there's Vale down here, and then Dante I saw further up. So that's somewhat convincing, and then we could go and check the other bolded names, which is the factions. I don't think it's really necessary, but I think you kind of get a flavour for how it works and how things fit together. So again, this is a very sort of high level overview of the latest features. The app here of NovelWriter does things top down, which was what I was showing you with the previous diagram. In my next app that I'm kind of briefly hinting at here, which is Story Daemon, things will emerge. So you start and you do a bottom-up process where you start with almost nothing, very minimal, and you just outline a few ideas and a few facts, and then you kind of grow it. That'll be quite interesting, and I'm going to show you that later. I'm going to close this for now, and thank you for watching. And if you can like and subscribe, it really helps to grow the channel. It's obviously a very small channel at the moment, but everything that you can do in terms of liking, subscribing, sharing the video with people who you think may want to watch it, and of course, if you ever follow through the links to GitHub and click a star onto the repos, it's all really much appreciated. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.